Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Farmers Insurance Initial Research Show. First off, apologies. I'm going to be laughing for a little bit. If you hear some barking in the background, my neighbor's dog is going apeshit. So I'm going to try not to get distracted, but it's pretty funny as hell. But welcome to the show. Hopefully your American Express went a lot better than mine. It was a day of what could have been for me, especially a week of what could have been and all that. First off, I had Tom Hoagie go into the water early on in the day. That really messed up a top 20 parlay that I had going on. And then on the 71st hole, Taylor Montgomery decided to go splash in Alcatraz, so that killed that win bet for me. So not a very positive week in terms of outright wagers, even though I was right there. And then DFS was just it was just bad. It was just a load of shit. It was just bad. For any good recommendation I had, there were plenty of bad ones. So I am looking forward to a new week, which, speaking of, make sure you adjust your calendars this week. The Farmers Insurance Open is running Wednesday to Saturday. The PGA does not want to battle or fight for TV time against the NFL playoffs. I don't really blame them. So the Farmers Insurance Open is Wednesday to Saturday. So that means an adjustment of a schedule here at Calls. Tonight, obviously, the initial research show. Monday will still be the data dive. Tuesday evening will be the DFS Tactics. I will need to figure out what time that is, as I already have plans Tuesday evening and I cannot back out of those. So it will absolutely be pretty late in the evening on Tuesday. But make sure you give me a follow over at social media. That is where I will be updating my schedule throughout the week, and maybe even a little later on. We'll see if there's any interest in the community watching what's going on Tuesday evening. I'll get into that a little bit later. But make sure you adjust your calendars, your notifications, all of that your lineups for the week for the Farmers Insurance Open are due Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. So let's get into everything Farmers Insurance Open. Since we have a shortened week, all statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, a much better DFS player. I believe it's simply the best tool out there for your money. Go check them out. It's well worth the investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media, Twitter and Instagram. This is where I'll be posting the aforementioned updates to the schedule this week. Twitter and Instagram is also where I post research for the week in findings of what I see, either field-wise or some historical knowledge around the course and the tournament. So if you want to see that, give me a follow at those places. And then give me a follow at Twitch if you want to see the in-depth research that I do to reach those conclusions. Tomorrow will absolutely be live, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. I'll be doing a look back at the American Express and to see how that mixed condition model went. It was fairly solid, I felt, especially since John Rahm was number 2 rated in my rankings, ends up winning all that stuff. But we'll cover that tomorrow over on Twitch. And then we'll also do some winter research. So if you want to see that in depth, give me a follow over at Twitch. And then Twitter is also where I post my betting cards every week for the golf tournament. So if you want to see the betting cards, give me a follow at Twitter. And then finally, we're live. Chat's open. How was your American Express? Like I said, I hope it was better than mine. Did you end up playing any round 3 showdown, any round 4 showdown? I decided not to play any showdown at all, even though I was live Friday evening. Just decided to kind of relax, watch a little bit of basketball, college or NFL football, and to see how my analysis did, since I really haven't done any individual round showdown. So jump in chat, let me know how your week went, and let me know what you are looking forward to for the Farmers Insurance Open. But with all of that said and done, let's do our initial research for the 2023 Farmers Insurance Open. And we're going to start, as we normally do on a Sunday evening, over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. And we are at historic Torrey Pines in La Jolla, California. Torrey Pines has 2 courses. So this is another tournament very similar to the RSM in the fall, in the sense that each player in the field will play one course on Thursday and then switch and go to the other course on Friday. And then the weekend, or for this week, Friday and Saturday, the entirety of the cut is played at the South Course, the main course. This is also where the the US Open was a couple of years ago, with John Rahm winning at Torrey Pines. The first thing that you should think about in terms of Torrey Pines, especially the South Course, it is long. It is a brutal course. 7,765 yards. And unlike Kapalua, it will play the entirety of the 7,765 yards. Not a lot of elevation changes. You don't have the mountainside that you're going up and down and all that stuff. This is a pretty flat 7,700 yards. So an extremely long course at Torrey Pines. The greens, slightly smaller than the average tour green. 5,000 here versus 5,500 or 6,000, depending on the source that you get that information. But certainly smaller greens here. Not a lot of fairway. Not a lot of fairway at all. In fact, we'll cover that here in a little bit. But 20 acres of fairway and 120 acres of rough. That is a lot of rough to navigate throughout the course. The reason why there is so much rough is that there is only one hole with water in play. 82 bunkers, a middling amount. So not a lot of sand, not a lot of water in play, just very, very narrow fairways and a long, long course. On the South Course, the main course, the greens are pure Poa annua. Now, the fairways and rough are ryegrass, but the greens are true Poa annua. So we're going to have to look into some Poa putting statistics this week. The original architects, William P. and William F. Bell, renovated in 2019 by Rees Jones. The note here about the fairways. 24 and 27 yard wide fairways, except for holes number 4 and number 13. 4 is pretty wide and narrows to a landing point, and then 13 is wide and then narrows beyond its landing point. So again, very, very narrow fairways here at the South Course. Just for informational purposes, every player in the field will play the North Course at least, or will play it once. I almost said at least once, but they will only play it once. And then if they make the cut, the players will play the South Course 3 times. Now, the North Course is much easier, although they have made it a bit more difficult over the years. It is not nearly as long, sitting at 7,258 yards. Again, the same architects, William P. and F. Bell, but this North Course was renovated by Tom Weiskopf in 2016. their greens are roughly average size. Their fairways are actually more narrow than the South Course. Not as much rough, very few bunkers, only 42. And one hole with water in play, similar to the South Course. The difference between the North Course and the South Course, other than the difficulty disparity, is that on the North Course, you're on bent grass greens. So 3 of the 4 days, you're going to be on POA. Only one of those days, you're going to be on bent. So I am not going to do anything really with bent grass putting, because if a player makes the cut, they're going to be up here playing the South Course both days of the cut, or both days of the weekend per se. So I'm not going to do anything in terms of bent grass, but that is an important note that you are on bent greens over on the North Course. And then you have ryegrass overseed in the fairways and the rough, similar to the South Course. So the only other information that is pertinent for this year's tournament, the director of agronomy, Devin Cullen, in an interview, and I'm not sure when this was done, so apologies with that, but mentioned with the amount of rain that California has been getting lately, that with the rain events still projected between now and the tournament, I'm expecting the course to play longer and thicker than it already does. Should be fun. It's fun for somebody like me who's doesn't have to play. I imagine this is going to be a pretty difficult tournament. It generally is. And if it's going to play longer, if the rough is going to play thicker than it normally does, it's going to be really difficult. So that is a look at Torrey Pines from a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. Again, average size greens at the North Course, slightly smaller at the main South Course. The South Course is extremely long, almost 7,800 yards. Not a lot of fairway, not a lot of sand. It's just long and difficult. The greens are POA this week for 3 out of 4 rounds. So there's a look at Torrey Pines in a GCSAA tournament fact sheet standpoint. Let's go ahead, move on over to Fantasy National. And the Farmers generally has some pretty big names play in it, and that's no exception this year. Tony Finau, John Rahm, who has won both tournaments he has played in 2023, Will Zalatoris, last year's runner-up, Max Homa, Justin Thomas, Xander, Sung Jae, Taylor Montgomery, Hideki, Colin Morikawa, go on down the list, Cam Davis, Siwoo, last year's winner, your defending champion, is Luke List. Big field this week. So you can see that I have set this just in terms of pure 2022 numbers, no other filters, and we'll get to that here in a moment. Give me 1 second as I adjust my chat settings. So before we get too much into the statistical research, let's look at the course in terms of a Fantasy National scorecard and graphical view. And to really highlight the difficulty of this tournament, first thing I like to do whenever I look at a scorecard is look at the 9th and 10th most difficult holes. If par falls right around in there, then it's going to play to about average. Well, you see 9th plays to a 10th over par. 10th easiest hole, or excuse me, 10th most difficult hole, plays still over par. You have to go to the 13th most difficult before you get to par. Now, there are some scoring opportunities here. The easiest hole does play to 4/10 under par. The finishing par 5 18th plays to a quarter of a shot under par. but very, very quickly you reach par in terms of the holes. And, you know, the hardest hole on the course, the par 4 12th, plays to almost 4/10 over par, almost completely negating the ease of the par 5. The second most difficult hole, a quarter of a shot over par, completely negating the second easiest hole on the course. Third most difficult hole, plays a quarter of a shot under, or quarter of a shot over par, 2/10 of a shot over par, another almost quarter of a shot over par. This Torrey Pines South is difficult because of its length. It is just long. You have to be long here to compete. That's why a lot of players sometimes just forego this tournament because they know they can't compete. The Brian Harmons, the Kevin Kisners, the guys that know they would need distance and they just simply don't have it. But that is a look at Torrey Pines in a scorecard view. Again, a decent eagle chance on the easiest hole, the par 5 6th, but really none of the other par 5s yield an eagle all that much. You got basically 1% here, 1.5 and 1.5. Not a lot of eagle chances, but you have to get your birdies here because we see how difficult the rest of the course is. Highlighted again, I mean, quarter of a shot over par, quarter of a shot over par, 4/10 over par, 2/10 over par, a quarter of a shot over par. Just a lot of holes where bogeys are plentiful. If we move towards the average strokes gained by shot type, I've got this set at the top 20s, just doing a little research earlier. Let's look at the top 10s. It is a ball striking course somewhat. You would think that with the length of the course, but because of its length, around the green is going to play a very big factor because it is very difficult to hit these greens in regulation. It's just not an easy course. You're going to have to be able to scramble. So look at the around the green compared to off the tee. It is fairly close, but around the green is actually higher than off the tee. That is not very common. And the putting, relatively close to strokes gained approach, especially since we're not looking at winners, we're looking at top 10s. So while it is a ball striking course for the top 10s, it is it's much more balanced than other courses, especially say like the American Express, which was all about ball striking. We move to the top 5s. Again, approach does creep over the 1.0 strokes gained per round for the top 5s. Putting really makes a rise. Around the green and off the tee start to equal. But then you go to the winners. Approach actually pulls ahead, which is a little surprising. I would have thought that putting would have made the difference. It's actually approach. It's actually strokes gained approach. Off the tee pulls ahead of the around the green by a decent little margin as well. So as much as it is a ball striking course throughout the top 10s, top 5s, and winners, it is much more neutral or balanced than other courses that we have seen because around the green is a factor this week. Again, keeping with the top 10s, we'll move to strokes gained by hole by par. You see par 5s leading right now ahead of the par 4s, and the par 3s kind of lag. Again, par 5s are your real only good scoring opportunities. So you've got to take advantage of those par 5s. Move to the top 5s. Par 3s start to catch up to the par 4s a little bit, but you see the importance of the par 5s almost to 2/10 per round. And then for the winners, par 3s and par 5s are basically equal. The par 3s actually pull ahead a little bit. Par 5s are going to be important. Par 3s for the winners have been important. I'm not so sure if we're going to put a whole lot of emphasis in the par 3s. It will be par 5s. And again, this is just the south course. There's also a north course, which we're not going to take a look at tonight. But its graph is heavily skewed to par 5s because those par 5s are pretty easy. So any eagle opportunities there are at this tournament come at the north course. So par 5s have an emphasis there. But for the south course, the course that's going to be played 3 of the 4 rounds, it's a lot of par 5s. You do have par 3s in your winners. But par 4s have been pretty consistent in this 0.16, 1718 range. Just fairly consistent. Top 10s down to the 0.14. We move to hole composition. There are 2 long par 3s that measure above 225 yards. You do have a medium length and a long par 3 as well, but 2 at 225 plus. You have 6 of the 10 par 4s measure to 450 to 500. So we'll see if that is a determining factor in terms of high leaderboard success when we go to Microsoft Excel. But you have 6 of 10 measure from 450 to 500. You do have a short, not drivable, but short par 4. 2 from 400 to 450, and 1 extremely long. That's the toughest hole on the course, the 505-yard par 4. And then 2 par 5s each from 550 to 600 and 600 to 650. The approach shot distribution, again, with a long course, you should think long approaches, and that is no different here. 200 plus is going to be a heavy emphasis in terms of approach shot and proximity importance. 200 plus. Historic cut line, again, speaking to the difficulty of the tournament. Last year's cut was -2. And again, the north course is fairly easy. That tells you how difficult the south course can be. Now, it has gotten down to as far as -5 before, -4, -3. It's generally in this -2 to -3 range. Maybe -1 to -3, which would put it at average. But it's going to play much more difficult than that. I'm going to tell you that right now, especially looking at this south course. You've got almost 20% bogeys and 2% in doubles. The Eagles bar is non-existent, and the birdies don't even equal the bogeys. So you've got more scores over par than you do under par. It's going to add to pretty difficult scoring situation. Accuracy, again, speaking to the narrowness of the fairways, accuracy much less than the average tour event. Green and regulation percentage much less than the average tour event. Course is long and the greens are smaller. Leads to very, very difficult greens to hit in regulation. And players are not as successful scrambling here than at the average tour event. Even though these greens are small, they're very undulated, they're very slopey, and they're fast. Generally, POA isn't kept at lightning speeds. These have been in the past, in between fast and lightning. So you can see scrambling percentage, 3 putts per round. These greens are tricky. They're fast, undulating. It is not an easy course to get around in any facet, off the tee, with the irons, or on the green. Now, distance here is higher than the average tour event just because of the length of the course. There's not... I really can only think of maybe one hole that is a situational maybe 3-wood or iron off a tee. Just due to the length of the course, players have to hit driver. So the distance is higher here than the average tour event. And then the green and regulation proximity, just again speaking to the difficulty, even though these greens are smaller than the average tour event, they are 2/3 of a foot further away in proximity. And a lot of that being because they're having to hit long irons into these greens. So there's a look at Torrey Pines in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. Before we move back to the strokes gained page view, let's take a quick look at the historic conditions. Sometimes wind can pick up a little bit. Generally it is calm. You see any round that's over 7,400 is the Torrey Pines South. 72 to 74 is Torrey Pines North. Last year, Torrey Pines North played to easy. The South course played difficult and then lightened up and moved to average over the weekend, but most of the time plays difficult. Curious, thanks for jumping in Twitch chat. Hope your weekend has went well. What you don't see, this is how I'll phrase it, what you don't see is any round at Torrey Pines South easy. You might see some averages, but you definitely don't see easy. Those are all over at Torrey Pines North. So, with that, and because the 3 of the 4 rounds are going to be at Torrey Pines South, the first thing I'm going to do, it's the first time we're going to look at this metric this year, or this filter I should say. Let's look at scoring relative par when it's difficult. We've had 3 tournaments in a row to start 2023 with easy relative par. Now let's look at when it's difficult. So, since the start of 2022, plus the 2 tournaments so far this year, because the American Express isn't in Fantasy National yet, your top performers when a round is difficult in the past year plus: Will Zalatoris, Keegan Bradley, Sung Jae, Justin Thomas, Tony Finau, Max Homa, John Rahm, Adam Hadwin, Brendan Steele, and Colin Morikawa. So, very good start to the week for these 10 analytically, because the South course will play difficult. I'm going to remove that. Let's move back to the historic conditions again, just very, very quickly. You see the rough generally kept long. It can be average, but it's generally kept long. The greens hover anywhere from fast to lightning. These are very undulating greens, slopey, difficult greens. Very difficult greens. So, we're going to look again just at POA. I'm not going to do anything with bent greens because there's only going to be 1 round that week or this week on bent. So let's look at POA. We're going to do fast and lightning POA. And we might have to expand into 2021 because there's not a lot of POA greens. You can see all of 2022 there were only 13 rounds from the player that played the most or putt the most on POA. So I am going to increase this to January of 2021, just so we get enough rounds for everybody to make it statistically significant. And you see, I mean, there's still plenty of players who have not putt POA, or at least in the database. But we do have a few players that have had 20 plus rounds. We've got quite a few players that have now moved into the teens in terms of rounds. Again, I don't like to go too far back, so I'm just going to keep it at 2021 for now. But in the past 2 years, your best putters on fast and lightning POA greens have been Bryce Garnett, Xander Schauffele, Satoshi Kodaira, Sung Jae, Wyndham Clark, Harris English, Taylor Montgomery, Bill Hawes, Maverick McNeely, and Ryan Armour. Taylor Montgomery, extremely interesting to see. He only has 3 rounds, and it was last year's Farmers, in which he putt pretty darn well. Gained in every single one of those rounds. So there's a look at your top putters historically on Fast and Lightning POA. If you're looking for Fast and Lightning POA kind of putting performances to maybe measure up to, you've got the old WGC Mexico, Club de Chapultepec. You have Detroit, the 3M, Monterey. Oh gosh, dang it! I think I clicked the wrong thing. You've got the Pebble Beach, which is Monterey Peninsula, Pebble Beach, and Spyglass Hill. Those are all POA. So if you want to take a look at those putting performances, now those are generally kept fast as opposed to Fast and Lightning. Riviera, the site of the Genesis Invitational, is also POA. So it wouldn't be a bad place to look either for some putting metrics to see who putts all of those tournaments pretty well, to see who perhaps putts POA the best across all of those events. But again, there are your top 10 in terms of Fast and Lightning POA for the past 2 years. I'm going to definitely narrow this in as we start to look at a few other things. I am absolutely going to look at some strokes gained approach, but I'm also going to be looking at some strokes gained around the green. It is just going to be a pretty big factor this week. However, I just, again, going through these filters, there's something else that we know absolutely 100% about Torrey Pines South. It's long. So let's look at long courses in totality. So on long courses, since the start of 2022, plus the 2 tournaments this year, your top performers on long courses have been John Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Will Zalatoris, Cameron Percy, Sungjae, Johnny Vegas, Bo Hostler, JJ Spawn, Gary Woodland, and Vaughn Taylor. But you see players like Vaughn Taylor and Tommy Gainey and Michael Kim, these players don't have stats in terms of off the tee approach, what's going on there. This is places like the Corrales and Puerto Rico. These are certainly long courses. They just don't have shot link, so we don't get the specifics. We're just looking in terms of strokes gained total. So do be aware of that as well. But there's a look at your top performers when a course is long. I might actually keep that on. Let's look at strokes gained approach on long courses. And again, it won't be fair to some of these players since they have played and perhaps pretty well, but we just don't have their shot link. But for the tournaments that we do have shot link on long courses, your top iron players or strokes gained approach players have been Gary Woodland, Lonto Griffin, Austin Smotherman, John Rahm, Henrik Norlander, Adam Hadwin, Nick Watney, Martin Laird, Justin Rose, and Luke List. Again, Luke List is your defending champion. I am going to remove the long course filter. Let's look at some around the green metrics. I'm going to do it with 2 different filters on, not at the same time, but we saw in the historic conditions, a lot of times this rough is kept long, and if the director of agronomy is saying that the course is probably going to play longer and thicker than normal due to the amount of rain California has, then this rough is going to be very hard to play out of. I want to look at long rough around the green. We could also look at approach, but might do that tomorrow. I just want to look at some around the green. So rough length, long. In the past year plus, your top around the green performers in those conditions have been Siwoo Kim, Saying You'll Know, Tony Finau, Adam Hadwin, Stefan Jaeger, Camilo Villegas, Bill Hawes, Scott Stallings, Kevin Streelman, and Sahith Theegala. If we look at around the green when it's difficult, let's see how much of some overlap we have here. So again, strokes gained around the green when it's difficult. Rory Sabatini, Siwoo Kim, Bill Hawes, Adam Hadwin, Sung Jae, Ben On, Aaron Baddeley, Dean Burmester, Peter Malnati, and Stefan Jaeger. And Ryan Armour. So the top 11 there. Siwoo Kim is overlapping in terms of around the green. Bill Hawes overlapping in terms of around the green. Don't remember Adam Hadwin if he was in the top 10 around the green in long rough. But he's generally a short game player, so would make some sense. Yeah. So there's a look at some total metrics and maybe some specifics that you can focus on to start your week. Let's look at 200 plus proximity. And I'm not going to use any filters, no difficult, no long course, just straight up 200 plus proximity. Your top players from that distance have been Gary Woodland, Xander Schauffele, Alex Smalley, Austin Eckroat, Max Homa, Sung Jae, Tommy Gainey, Austin Smotherman, Kurt Kitayama, and Emiliano Grillo. So a lot of overlap here. Gary Woodland, I believe, was the number one strokes gained approach player on long courses. So that would make sense. Again, number one at 200 plus. Xander and his penchant for contending in majors. Max Homa, Sung Jae, with some of these other names here as well. Austin Smotherman, Austin Eckroat, Alex Smalley are some names to keep an eye on as well early on in your research this week. The only other thing I want to look at in a broad view tonight with you all, let's look at scrambling. I'm actually going to look at some scrambling when it's difficult. We know that the South Course is generally difficult. And again, a reminder that scrambling is not the average scrambling. How am I trying to say this? Players are not as successful scrambling here as they are at the average tour event, so scrambling is going to be important. So our top scramblers, when a round is difficult, entering this week, those players are Sebastian Munoz, Bill Hawes, James Hahn, Vaughn Taylor, Sung Jae, Taylor Montgomery, Austin Cook, Tony Finau, Wyndham Clark, and Dylan Fratelli. So Bill Hawes has been up there in a majority, if not all, of the, say, around the green metrics, scrambling and whatnot. Vaughn Taylor, I believe, was up there for something as well. Sung Jae's been up there a lot. Taylor Montgomery for POA putting and now scrambling. Tony Finau's been up there a lot, generally likes playing this tournament. So there's quite a few names as well to add to your initial research this week. Let's move to the tournament history. And I went ahead and sorted on the strokes gained total. Again, this tournament has been played at Torrey Pines for as long as I can remember, certainly all the way back to 2018, before that even, so no need to cut off any of these years for course changes. So in the past 5 years, your leading strokes gained total player is Jon Rahm, a T30 or T29, top 30 in 2018, middling to decent-ish finish, but then 4 straight years of a top 10. 3 of those 4 inside the top 5. So he has had a lot of success here, plus his win at Torrey Pines, the U.S. Open. Ryan Palmer has played this event extremely well. Nothing outside of a T21 in the last 5 years. Justin Rose, winner in 2019. He is 3 for 4. The 3 cuts made are top 10s. He did miss the cut in 2020, but a lot of strokes gained total. He's played well here. Now, Tony Finau missed the cut last year, but has had a lot of success in years prior. Jason Day has always played this event very well. He is a 2-time winner of this event, 2018 and 2015. Luke List, your defending champion. Again, he has played this event very well. Hideki, 5 for 5. Gary Woodland, 4 for 5. Sungjae is 4 for 4. Keegan Bradley, 4 for 4. Siwoo, 3 for 4. So some pretty good performances from these players. The other end of the spectrum, guys that have not played this event well. Michael Gligic, Jim Herman. Great look at Grayson Murray. He's made the cut every single year, but he's one of the lowest in terms of strokes gained total. He's done enough to make the cut to some very clunker finishes. Some other names here: Dylan Fratelli, 2 for 4. Adams Vinson, 2 for 2. Last year's was pretty bad. Looks like he might have finished last of the players that made the cut. Some other names here: Trey Mullinex, someone who's got some length, has not played this course well. Thinking on it makes a little bit of sense. Mullinex generally plays best when it's easy. So definitely not easy here at Torrey Pines South. Adam Shank, Sebastian Munoz hasn't played this event well. Tyler Duncan, 0 for 3. Some other names here: Kyle Stanley, 2 for 5. So there's a few names that have not played this event very well. That is going to do it for the Fantasy National portion. Let's go ahead and move on over to Microsoft Excel. And I will bring up the comparison course first. Again, as a reminder, this is taking the top 30 finishers and seeing what their specialties have been at each course. So as you can see, off the tee, actually 28% less important here at the Farmers versus the average full field course. And looking at this, you would say, well, there's not really a specific broad category that matters. Well, there is, and we'll dive into this very heavily tomorrow over on Twitch. I'm just going to show you this one just because I know it right offhand. This is a very, very, very low outlier. When you remove that, around the green becomes almost course average. And again, it's still negative, but you see the emphasis of around the green compared to the other metrics here at Torrey Pines South and the Farmers Insurance. So there's going to be quite an emphasis on strokes gained around the green. We move across to driving statistics. And again, even though off the tee doesn't matter, driving distance does here. You have to be able to just have some length to compete here at Torrey Pines and the Farmers Insurance. So 90% more important here. Now fairways, maybe not so much, although I have a suspicion that there could be a low outlier here. Good drives gained, there is absolutely a low outlier here. You've got everything else is around this 2. Look how consistent these numbers are. 256, 252, 255, 254, and then you have this 1.42. Well, you remove that outlier, good drives become 7% more important here. So good drives gained is absolutely something that we want to focus on this week, which makes a lot of sense. If you're hitting these greens in regulation, you're doing very, very well. You're doing well against the majority of the field. So why wouldn't it just be greens? Well, it very well could be as well. Look at all of these. You've got 4 years in the threes, and then you have this very, very low 2.3. So if we remove that outlier, you've got two stats here that are 7% more important. Doesn't sound like a lot. Again, these are going to be highly emphasized this week due to the difficulty and length of the course. So good drives gained and greens in regulation. Now this is going to be very odd to see, but I want to reemphasize it's not just the South course we're playing. It's just the main South is the main course we're playing. Eagles is saying 71% more important. A lot of that is coming from the North course. And again, everybody's going to play the North course once. So if you're able to take advantage of those par fives, the one day you play them, you're going to get a pretty significant advantage because Eagles are not to be had on the South course. So Eagles might be something we want to look at. I'm not terribly sure, but we'll definitely look at it tomorrow in the data dive. What I can tell you, birdies, probably something we're going to look at. Even though this course is difficult, you see birdies gained is 10% more important than the average full field course versus 7% on bogeys. My initial thought is if a course is difficult, you want to avoid bogeys because pars are good scores. But sometimes you do need to look at the birdies gained on a difficult course, and that's the case here at the Farmers. We might look at both, but pretty clearly birdies gained is more important than bogeys avoided. Is this a multi-day tournament? Every golf tournament is multi-day. Now this tournament is unique in the sense that it's using two courses. Most golf tournaments will be played at the same course for 4 days in a row. So that's the uniqueness of this tournament. But every golf tournament, with the exception of one, is 4 days. Normally Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then there's one tournament that is 5 rounds, Wednesday through Sunday. Or 5 days, Wednesday through Sunday. So hopefully that clears up that question for you. We move to par 3s. Again, par 3s in total, not terribly important. The longer ones, yes. Remember, there's one par 3 that measures to this length on the scorecard, 1 to here and 2 to here. Now, not every single course has a 225 plus par 3. So again, tomorrow on Twitch in the morning, we're going to really dive into this, see if this is going to be a leading factor, and then we'll take a look at it tomorrow night in the data dive as well. But I'm really going to scrutinize the specific lengths of the par 3s, 4s, and 5s over on Twitch. But right now it looks like the longer par 3s are where you want to put your focus this week for par 3 metrics. Par 4s, we saw this in the graphs. It was always, it was pretty consistent, but it was always lower than the par 5s. And for the winners at Torrey Pines South, at least, par 4s were lower than the par 3s. Now, the 450 to 500 is extremely important. Again, 60% of the par 4s at Torrey Pines South measure to here. So very important. Any par 4 that you're looking at is going to be 450 to 500. Moving to the par 5s, they're just, again, they're really the only good scoring opportunities at Torrey Pines South. And Torrey Pines North, the easier course, par 5s are so important because those are eagle opportunities. So even though all of these are more important in terms of against the average full field course, we're probably going to look at all of par 5s because the most important one is 500, 550, and all of those come at Torrey Pines North. So we're going to look at par 5s, but they're going to be weighted pretty heavily. They're going to be weighted pretty heavily, 45% more important than the average full field course. Last thing I want to look at in terms of specific course comparison, look at the proximities. Total 7% less important. I'm going to highlight for you. Oh, it's getting cut off. My apologies. I'm going to highlight the 200 plus here, and I'll zoom in for you on it. The 200 plus, 10%, 11% more important. We're going to be focusing on that length of approach shot this week at Torrey Pines South. All right, so there's a look at the Farmers from a course standpoint in terms of metrics and the averages of what's important, what's not important against other courses. Last thing I'm going to show you all for the evening, this is the early look file. Again, this is the strokes gained total tab from Fantasy National. Moved on over to Excel, split between where the players have put the majority of their statistics in, for lack of better terms. So John Rahm, in the past 5 years, he's played this event 5 times. He's averaged a 9th place finish. In those 5 years, he's averaged 3.3 off the tee each year. I'll let you take a gander at that really quickly, and I'll bring it back right at the end of the show. Right now, what I want to do is filter out the players who have only played it once. I want to see the players who have played this consistently, what they have been doing well here at Torrey Pines South. So, John Rahm, a lot of off the tee. Actually, his approach hasn't been great, but you see the around the green, positive. He's putt well here. Ryan Palmer, a lot of off the tee, a lot of approach. Now, he's the one player inside the top 30, as you can see here, who is negative in terms of around the green. Otherwise, everyone else who has played this event multiple years in the past 5 years have been positive in terms of strokes gained around the green. It is just important. All but one have been positive in approach. All but one have been positive in off the tee. Although that number is the highest of the negatives, 1.2. And same for putting, thanks to Keegan. But you got a lot of green here and off the tee. I do want to emphasize the around the green is going to be pretty darn important. Let's just look at the top players who have averaged the top 30. So off the tee, that's an average of a 1.2, 1.9, 0.7, and a 0.7. I know it's not looking like it at the moment. Again, re-emphasizing the around the green will be a factor due to the difficulty of the course, the fact that players are not as successful scrambling here. This is one of the few tournaments that I look at around the green. Moving on over to driving statistics. You see, most of your players who have played this well have been substantially positive in terms of driving distance, with the exception of Robbie Shelton. John Rahm, even Ryan Palmer has been positive a decent amount in terms of driving distance. Luke List always hit a bomber off the tee. Justin Rose, Tony Finau, Will Zalatoris. These guys are bombers off the tee. They tend to do well here. Maybe not necessarily as much with fairways, but you see the good drives, and especially the greens. Now, Robbie Shelton, again, lower in distance and negative in good drives, but he is the only one in that same top 30, even in the top 40, who is negative in good drives. That's an average of a 2.1. But for greens, it is an average of a 2.6. And again, you only have one player that's negative in greens. Good drives and greens, and we'll scrutinize this quite heavily tomorrow on the Data Dive show as we go through prior leaderboards. But I showed you the outliers from the previous spreadsheet. Good drives gained and greens in regulation are going to be pretty darn important. Moving to scoring, eagles, birdies, bogeys, and whatnot. Eagles don't jump off the page very quickly. Where you're going to see the Eagles come into play is when we go through the Data Dive show tomorrow night and we look at specific years of leaderboards. That Eagles do come into play. But even though this is a difficult tournament, more birdies and bogeys. More birdies and bogeys. More birdies and bogeys. More birdies. You have to come down to Hideki before you get more in terms of bogeys than birdies. And Will Zalatoris is the same. Again, I'm only highlighting that because, at least for me, naturally thinking would be, okay, difficult tournament. A par is a good score. It means you want to avoid the bogeys. Whereas if a course is easy, like we have been the past 3 weeks, if a course is easy, you have to go and get the birdies because par is not a good score. But here at the Farmers, everybody seems to struggle. So any birdies that you get is a bonus. And that's why they've been, they're being highlighted in importance, I guess is the way I'm trying to phrase it. Again, moving to par 3s and 4s and 5s. It's not a lot here, I don't see, right off the bat. Especially in terms of players who have played this well. Now, par 4s, not a lot of heavy green, to be honest with you. And we kind of saw that in the specifics of the course data. Not a lot of heavy green in the par 4s. It's really the par 5s. Even though right here isn't all that heavy green. 450 to 500 is the most important length. And, I mean, yeah, all of these players are positive in terms of par 4s, 450 to 500. Every single player who's played this event multiple years and has averaged a top 40 or better is positive in terms of 450 to 500. That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong correlation there. So I like to see that. Par 5s. Again, for the players that have finished in the top 30, is pretty important. Again, this is highlighting the 500 to 550s. That's from Torrey Pines North. But par 5s in general is where I'm at with that. And then lastly, proximity, especially 200 plus. Surprising to see some of the best players like John Rahm, Matthew Neesmith, who's played this event well. They're not necessarily playing well from 200 plus. I thought there would be quite a bit more green up here. Now, Justin Rose, who's won this tournament in the past, is pretty high in the green here. Will Zalatoris, last year's runner-up. Will Gordon, Cameron Percy, who's only played it twice. Gary Woodland's played this event very well. You can see he's done well from 200 plus. There is going to be an emphasis on 200 plus. But we will absolutely scrutinize all of that tomorrow over on Twitch. And then we'll go through some of the prior leaderboards for the Data Dive show tomorrow. But that's going to wrap it up for the initial research show for the Farmers. I'll leave you off with this, the past performance of the players at the Farmers Insurance Open. Thanks to everybody who tunes in and watched, listened. Hopefully your American Express went better than mine. A reminder for the schedule this week. Sunday tonight, the initial research show. Tomorrow morning, we will be taking a look back at the American Express, really scrutinize my mixed condition model. We'll take a look at my lineups, see what I did wrong in that regard, which was a lot. And then we will look at some specifics around Torrey Pines and previous winners. That's, here and the Matrix and all that stuff. We'll take a look at that over on Twitch and try to figure out if we can find a pattern from these winners of the previous Farmers Insurance Opens. And then tomorrow night will be the Data Dive show at 9 p.m. Eastern, like usual. Now Tuesday, I'm going to try and be online in the morning and prep the mixed condition model, because Tuesday night is going to be the DFS Tactics show. This tournament is from Wednesday to Saturday. Remember, Wednesday to Saturday is this tournament because the PGA doesn't want to compete with the NFL playoffs. So, speaking of Tuesday evening, I have a year-long draft, essentially, with some of the friends, off the stream and whatnot. If you would be interested in me broadcasting that or recording that and putting that out on my channel, put it in the comments or reach out to me on social media if you think you'd be interested in watching that draft. See how I approach it, see the picks that I make, and all of that. Otherwise, when I finish that draft, I will then be live afterwards. So give me a follow if you aren't already to my social media. That's where I'll be updating my schedule this week. This Tuesday evening show will be pretty late. That is my assumption. So there is a look at this week's schedule leading up to when lineups are due Wednesday morning for the Farmers. So, again, thanks to everyone who tuned in, watched, listened, curious for jumping into Twitch chat. I always appreciate the support. Love what I do, even on the weeks that I struggle, like this past week at the American Express. Thankful that you all come back week after week. Maybe have a little bit of fun at my expense, because it's definitely deserved on weeks like last week. But again, just always thanks for the support. Really appreciate it. For all of the wagers that you made this past week at the American Express, for all of the DFS contests you entered this past week at the American Express. Until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.